Every gilded cage is built with walls of comfort. The only question is what you're paying for them.
Okay, so we're about to dive into a collection of ideas that present a version of the world that's, well, completely different from the one we're used to. This is a journey into what some people call hidden history, a landscape full of alleged secrets, complex systems, and some pretty startling possibilities. So where does this all start? Well, the sources we're looking at today all begin with one simple but really powerful question. What if the official story isn't the whole story? They challenge us to take a second look at events we thought we understood and to ask, who really benefits from the narratives we've all been told. For instance, some sources point to these hidden hands shaping huge historical events. They suggest that really powerful, secretive organizations have been steering the course of history from the shadows for centuries. And then you've got others who are questioning the hard physical evidence of pivotal moments in our more recent past. They highlight these really stark contradictions between what experts said, like this quote from a World Trade Center construction manager, and the official explanations of what actually happened. And that quote right there, that's basically our invitation. This is our entry point into this world of hidden history, where every single event might just be another clue. The sources we're digging into today are asking us to just suspend our disbelief for a bit and follow the trail, no matter where it might lead. All right, let's start with specific moments in time. The flashpoints, really, where, according to these sources, the truth was deliberately concealed. These are the major traumas that have sparked decades of questions and alternative theories. Let's take the JFK assassination, for example. The official narrative, the one we all know, is that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman. But this alternative view, it flips that completely on its head. It suggests he was actually a patsy set up to take the fall for a much bigger plot he was trying to stop. And to back this up, sources point to some pretty incredible personal testimony. This quote, from a woman who claimed to be Oswald's mistress, suggests he knew about the plot and was actually trying to intervene. In this version of the story, Oswald is no longer a villain. He's a tragic figure. Okay, now fast forward a few decades. Another massive national trauma, 9/11. The sources we're looking at here question the military's response that day. They point out that standard intercept procedures, which were supposedly used 67 times in the year before, somehow failed to stop any of the 4 hijacked planes. And this idea isn't just pulled out of thin air. It's fueled by what people on the ground were saying. Some sources highlight news reports from the scene where fire officials were reported to have heard explosions that were separate from the plane impacts, which, of course, feeds theories of a controlled demolition. So you've got to ask, right? If these huge events were somehow manipulated, who on earth has the power to pull something like that off? This is where the rabbit hole starts to get a lot deeper, as we move from these isolated incidents to the systems that might actually connect them all. Okay, that brings us to our second section, what's called the architecture of control. We're shifting from looking at specific events to the systems, the financial and political machinery that, according to these sources, is operating just behind the curtain. Now, a big target for a lot of these sources is the creation of the Federal Reserve back in 1913. They argue it's not a government agency at all, but a private cartel. And they'll cite people like Congressman McFadden, who was chairman of the House Banking Committee, claiming it was designed by international bankers to control the entire economy for their own benefit. So how does this control work? Well, as it's described in these sources, the core mechanic is a monetary system built entirely on debt. This slide kind of breaks down their argument. If every single dollar is borrowed into existence with interest, but the money to pay that interest also has to be borrowed, well, you create a mathematical trap. It's a system they claim is designed for perpetual scarcity and control. And it's not just about money. These narratives also point to these really powerful political organizations. Take this quote from a former member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He alleges that its real purpose is to break down national borders to make way for a centralized one-world government. Okay, so if you've got these systems, this architecture of control, then who are the architects, right? who are the actors actually running the show and pulling the levers of these powerful organizations? All right, Section 3. Now we're talking about the unseen puppeteers. The sources we're exploring identify several specific groups that are allegedly pulling the strings, connecting all the dots between finance, politics, and these major historical events. You start digging into this stuff, and you see the same names pop up over and over again. The Jesuits, the Freemasons, Skull and Bones, the Bilderberg Group. They're all described as these secretive orders whose members are in the highest positions of power, in government, media, industry, forming this interlocking web of influence. And the claims about how far this influence goes are, well, they're huge. For instance, one claim alleges that a group like the Jesuit Order has significant ownership and control over America's top defense contractors. But here's what really seals the deal for a lot of these researchers. It's this idea of overlapping memberships, like this claim from a self-proclaimed ex-Jesuit priest. This suggests that behind all these different names and ideologies, there's a deeper, unified network at play. Which, of course, leads us to the biggest question of all. If you've got these actors controlling these systems and manipulating these huge events, why? What is the end game? What is their grand design? What kind of world are they trying to create? And that brings us to the very bottom of the rabbit hole. This is where the claims go way beyond just politics and finance and start to redefine our entire understanding of history, the future, and even reality itself. Okay, so one of the most sweeping theories you'll find down here is this concept of a lost history. It proposes that a global, technologically advanced civilization called Tartaria was intentionally wiped from our historical record. Proponents of this idea claim that its magnificent structures, which they say were actually advanced atmospheric energy generators, have just been repurposed as our modern cathedrals, banks, and capitol buildings. Now, while some are looking at the past, other sources are focused squarely on the future. They view global plans like the UN's Agenda 21 not as helpful environmental initiatives, but as a kind of stealthy roadmap to a controlled post-human world, using global crises as the justification to consolidate global power. So, from a past that might have been erased to a future that's being carefully planned, all these threads kind of weave together into one final, really provocative thought. After journeying through manipulated events, hidden systems, and secret actors, we're left to wonder, what if the biggest secret isn't who's in control, but what reality itself actually is? What if the very world we perceive is the grandest conspiracy of all?